The whole term and the whole measuring of vertical elite began, I think, with David Thompson. When he was there on above you, he surprised you.
First person I saw was Julius Erving, and he brought so much creativity to the game. The under the hand against the Lakers, where you're behind the basket. We all tried to do it once he did it. I guess I would have never had those visions if I hadn't have seen Dr. J.
Michael Jordan didn't just dominate the game, he changed the standard for what greatness looked like. 6 championships, 5 MVPs, a perfect finals record, and the kind of willpower that left opponents broken before tip-off. But even a player like Jordan, known for his relentless competitiveness, had a short list of names he admired. Not just players he beat, but players he respected, for their mindset, their impact, their game. Some inspired him before he reached the league. Others stood beside him in the fiercest moments of battle. But all 7 made an impression deep enough for Jordan to say, that guy was special. And here's the thing, when Michael talks about respect, it's not handed out casually. He's not listing stats. He's talking about the rare players who earned his trust, his rivalry, and sometimes even his friendship. From legends of the ABA to rivals in the Eastern Conference, here are the 7 basketball players Michael Jordan respected the most, and why each one stood out in a league full of stars. But before proceeding, please take a second and subscribe and like this video. It will be very motivation for us. Long before Michael Jordan was soaring through the air in Chicago, there was Julius Erving gliding through the sky in Philadelphia. And for Jordan, Dr. J wasn't just a highlight machine. He was the prototype, the blueprint, the one who showed that grace and dominance could live in the same body. Jordan was just 13 years old when Erving led the Sixers to the NBA Finals in 1977. That same year, Dr. J averaged over 21 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and nearly 2 steals per game, all while bringing a new kind of electricity to the league. His dunks weren't just violent, they were beautiful. And for a teenage Jordan watching from North Carolina, Erving's game wasn't just inspiring, it was almost mythological. By the time Jordan entered the league in 1984, Dr. J was nearing the end, but even then, he still carried himself like basketball royalty. In one of their early matchups, Jordan reportedly introduced himself with a bit of nervous humility. Erving told him, "You don't need to say hello. I know who you are." That moment stuck with Jordan. The icon had just validated the rookie, and from that point forward, there was always a quiet, mutual respect. In total, Jordan and Erving only played against each other 6 times in the NBA. But it wasn't about head-to-head battles. It was about lineage, about legacy. Jordan never denied how much of his game and his mindset was influenced by Erving. The swagger, the athleticism, the way Erving made the game look like art. Jordan once told Slam magazine, "Dr. J was the guy that I looked up to the most. If it wasn't for him, I'm not sure I'd be here." But the admiration went both ways. Dr. J once called Jordan a freak of nature with the brain of a surgeon. He saw in Jordan the full evolution of what he had tried to create. Someone who took flight, but also dissected defenses with purpose. Someone who could dazzle the crowd and dominate the box score. What makes this respect even more meaningful is that Erving wasn't just a highlight reel. He was an 11-time All-Star, a league MVP, and a champion in both the ABA and NBA. He scored over 30,000 career points when combining both leagues, something many fans overlook. He also carried teams with real leadership, weathered losing seasons, and redefined what stardom looked like in a rapidly changing league. Jordan didn't just see flash, he saw substance. And perhaps most telling of all, when the NBA celebrated its 75th anniversary, Jordan went out of his way to mention Dr. J in interviews as one of the first players who made the game bigger than basketball. For someone as fiercely competitive and ego-driven as Jordan, that kind of acknowledgement isn't common. It's earned through greatness, through innovation, and through impact that echoes across generations. To Michael Jordan, Julius Erving was more than just an icon. He was a symbol of what the game could become, and a reminder that no matter how high you fly, you always learn from someone who soared first. Michael Jordan didn't just admire David Thompson, he credited him with being the reason he fell in love with basketball.
The whole term and the whole measuring of vertical elite began, I think, with David Thompson. He vaulted off the ground, exploded off the ground. 44 inches was a lot, still is a lot. You can tell when he was there above you, he surprised you.
In Jordan's Hall of Fame induction speech in 2009, he didn't start with Dean Smith or his father. He started with Thompson, who was sitting just a few feet away. When you're growing up, you need someone to look up to. For me, it was David Thompson, Jordan said. That reverence didn't come from highlight tapes alone. Jordan had studied Thompson's career, the impact he had at NC State, the swagger he brought to the ABA, and the elegance he played with in the NBA. For Jordan, Thompson was more than a high-flying guard. He was a symbol of what was possible. Thompson came into the league with a level of athleticism that was almost mythical for his era. Standing just 6'4", he had a vertical leap that reached over 44 inches and was reported to have touched the top of the backboard in a pre-draft measurement. In the mid-1970s, when most players weren't playing above the rim unless they were 6 feet 10 inches, Thompson was defying gravity. He made leaping feel effortless, and he didn't need a running start to take flight. The way he elevated, straight up, off one leg, from a standstill, had never really been seen before in the league. His impact was immediate. In 1976, Thompson helped lead the Denver Nuggets to the ABA Finals, averaging 26 points per game as a rookie. He won ABA Rookie of the Year, made the All-ABA First Team, and was named MVP of the ABA All-Star Game. That same year, when the NBA and ABA merged, Thompson seamlessly transitioned into the bigger league and quickly became one of its most electric scorers. In the 1977-78 NBA season, Thompson averaged 27.2 points per game and nearly won the scoring title, only to lose it by the narrowest of margins to George Gervin, who dropped 63 points in his final game of the season. Thompson, for his part, had scored 73 points earlier that same day against the Pistons, the fourth highest scoring game in NBA history at the time. That wasn't just a volume stat. He shot 28 of 38 from the field in that game, adding 17 of 20 from the free throw line. It was the kind of performance Jordan would replicate a decade later, but in 1978, it felt like watching a prototype for what would come. Jordan wasn't alone in his admiration. Magic Johnson once called Thompson the greatest small guard ever, and Larry Bird referred to him as the most underrated player of his generation. What stood out to his peers wasn't just the dunks, it was the control. Thompson could float in the air, but always seemed to be in full command. He didn't just jump higher, he made smarter reads, had a smooth mid-range jumper, and knew how to finish through contact. But the admiration Jordan had went deeper than Thompson's game. He saw in Thompson a player who didn't always get his due. Despite his early dominance, Thompson's career was cut short by injuries and substance abuse problems. By 1984, he was out of the league at just 29 years old. Jordan understood what that meant, how greatness could burn out early, how legacy could be shaped as much by what you didn't get to show as what you did. For someone as legacy-conscious as MJ, Thompson's trajectory was a cautionary tale, but also a source of motivation. Jordan studied Thompson's footwork, his ability to stop on a dime and pull up, his fearlessness in attacking the rim. In a 1997 interview, Jordan said, "People talk about Dr. J as the guy who influenced me, but before I ever saw Erving play live, I was watching Thompson. He was the first guy I wanted to be. He even wore the number 23 because it was close to Thompson's 22, a subtle tribute to the man who first lit the fire." What also connected the two was their shared North Carolina roots. Thompson had starred at NC State, winning a national title in 1974 and ending UCLA's 7-year reign in the process. That win, breaking the most dominant dynasty in college basketball, mattered to young players across the state. It was proof that North Carolina players could lead, win, and change the game. Years later, Jordan would do the same for UNC and then take it a step further in the NBA. Thompson's influence didn't stop with highlight reels and interviews. When Jordan launched his annual flight school basketball camp, he invited Thompson more than once to speak with young athletes about discipline, potential, and redemption. And Thompson's story, a rise, a fall, and a personal comeback through faith and recovery, left an impression on Jordan. It reminded him that greatness wasn't just about banners and trophies, it was about resilience. In Thompson, Jordan saw a man who didn't just shape the past, he altered Jordan's future. The elegance of his game, the vulnerability of his journey, and the pride of their shared home state made Thompson more than a role model. He was the reason the greatest player of all time ever picked up a basketball. And for that, David Thompson will always be one of Michael Jordan's all-time favorite players. When Michael Jordan talks about respect, he rarely uses the word lightly. And when it came to Larry Bird, respect wasn't just a courtesy, it was a necessity. Bird wasn't flashy, he didn't play above the rim. But when Jordan looked across the court and saw number 33 in green and white, he knew he was dealing with a different kind of threat, one that didn't have to run fast or jump high to ruin your night. Jordan once called Larry Bird a cold-blooded killer, not in a metaphorical sense, but as an honest assessment of how Bird approached the game. Surgical, relentless, and calculated. Theirs wasn't a friendship in the traditional sense. Early in Jordan's career, Bird was the immovable object standing in his way, but over time, the sharp edges of rivalry gave way to admiration. Jordan grew to appreciate Bird's intellect, his competitiveness, and most of all, his ability to dominate without ever breaking character. Their first playoff clash came in 1986, when Jordan's Bulls, still a young developing team, ran into the fully formed Boston Celtics, a championship-caliber machine. In that series, Jordan had one of the most iconic performances of his career, a 63-point explosion in Game 2 at the Boston Garden. It's still the NBA record for most points in a playoff game. After the game, Larry Bird, the reigning MVP and vocal leader of the Celtics, didn't scoff or downplay it. Instead, he said the now legendary line, "That was God disguised as Michael Jordan." For a player like Bird, who rarely gave compliments, that statement held weight. Jordan never forgot it. It was Bird's way of acknowledging not just a hot night, but a rising force in the league. And over the years, that mutual recognition deepened. Jordan realized that Bird wasn't just tough. He was one of the smartest players to ever touch the floor. He manipulated defenses, predicted plays, and controlled tempo without ever looking hurried. He wasn't guessing out there. He knew. Bird wasn't athletic in the traditional sense, but he punished defenses in ways that were more cerebral and more painful. You couldn't speed him up. You couldn't rattle him. And if you left him open for even a second, he'd bury you. Jordan respected that, because deep down, he knew how much of the game was played above the shoulders. Bird's trash talk was legendary, but it wasn't for entertainment. It was strategic. He'd tell you where he was going to shoot, then go there and hit the shot anyway. It wasn't arrogance. It was calculation. But competitive fire also aligned. Both men hated losing. Both demanded accountability, and both played through pain without fanfare. In fact, Bird's entire career was a lesson in durability, not just physically, but mentally. He played through a broken back in his later years, showing up night after night because he understood his role, his leadership, and the standards he'd set. Jordan watched how Bird led the Celtics and internalized it. The way Bird held his teammates to high expectations, how he never let them off the hook, how he set the tone by example. Those were traits Jordan would emulate in Chicago. When Jordan became the veteran, when he had to guide Scottie Pippen, push Tony Kukoc, or challenge Horace Grant, he did it with a standard that wasn't unlike Bird's. Even when Bird's playing days ended, his presence loomed. As head coach of the Indiana Pacers in the late 90s, Bird found himself once again on the opposite sideline from Jordan, this time in the 1998 Eastern Conference Finals. That series went 7 games. It was physical, tactical, and emotionally draining. Bird's Pacers pushed the Bulls harder than almost anyone during their championship runs. And after Chicago won Game 7, Jordan made sure to find Bird on the court and pull him close. It was quick, but sincere, a nod to the chess match they'd just played and the years of history that shaped it. Off the court, their respect never wavered. Jordan has said in multiple interviews that Bird was one of the few players who truly got it. Not just the game, but the mindset, the culture, the responsibilities that came with being great. He once said, "Larry Bird is the only player I feared." It's a striking quote from a man who rarely showed fear to anyone, but it wasn't fear of Bird's athleticism. It was fear of his ability to control every variable, to see 2 steps ahead, and to punish even the smallest mistakes. In 2013, when Bird was asked about Jordan's place in history, he didn't hesitate. "He's the best player I've ever seen," Bird said. "He made the game look easy." Coming from Bird, that was the ultimate endorsement, and Jordan knew it. For Jordan, Larry Bird represented more than a rival. He was proof that greatness didn't need flash, that winning came in many forms, that trash talk could be a weapon, and leadership didn't have to be loud to be effective. Bird played his way, won his way, and never compromised. That's why Michael Jordan didn't just respect him, he revered him. When you think about Michael Jordan's fiercest rivals, Magic Johnson doesn't always come to mind right away. Their careers barely overlapped in their peaks. They didn't have a decade of finals clashes or heated playoff battles like Bird and Magic or Jordan and the Pistons. But in terms of influence, in terms of legacy, style, and greatness, there are very few names Jordan respects more than Erving Magic Johnson. Their most iconic moment together came early in Jordan's dynasty, during the 1991 NBA Finals. It was Jordan's Bulls against Magic's Lakers, old guard versus new, Showtime against rising dominance. Magic was 31, still elite, but nearing the end. Jordan was 28, fully in his prime. For Jordan, that series wasn't just about winning his first title. It was about proving he belonged in the same breath as the legends who came before, and Magic was the gatekeeper. The Bulls won that series in 5 games, with Jordan averaging 31.2 points, 11.4 assists, 6.6 rebounds, and 2.8 steals on 56% shooting. He was everywhere. And yet, even as Jordan took the torch, he did so with profound admiration for the man he was taking it from. Magic didn't make it easy. In that series, he averaged a near triple-double, 18.6 points, 12.4 assists, 8.0 rebounds, still orchestrating the offense with mastery, still finding shooters, still making the floor feel like his stage. But Jordan's respect for Magic didn't start in 1991. It had been building for years. Back in the 1980s, when Jordan was climbing the ranks at UNC and then entering the NBA, Magic was already the face of the league. Alongside Bird, he saved the NBA from irrelevance. Magic made basketball fun again. His passes weren't just effective, they were joyful. He made the game feel creative, artistic, unpredictable. And for Jordan, someone who viewed basketball as both craft and performance, that mattered. There's a reason Jordan didn't just want to win, he wanted to win with style. That's a page straight from Magic's book. From the no-look dimes to the smile that masked a killer instinct, Magic understood the stage of the NBA better than anyone. He wasn't playing for stats, he was playing for moments, for rhythm, for impact. And Jordan, who would later become the most marketed athlete of all time, learned how to carry the weight of that spotlight in part by watching how Magic handled it. But don't mistake the smile for softness. Jordan respected Magic not just for flair, but for competitiveness. Behind the grin was a ruthless tactician. Magic wasn't trying to beat you by being cute. He wanted to dissect you. He could run the break at 6 feet 9 inches with the precision of a point guard and the vision of a quarterback. He led the league in assists 4 times. He won 5 NBA titles, was a 3-time MVP, and is still considered arguably the greatest pure point guard in history. Jordan saw that. And more than that, he admired it. When the Dream Team assembled in 1992, Magic wasn't at the top of his game. He had already retired from the NBA due to his HIV diagnosis, and his presence on the roster was as much symbolic as it was strategic. But to Jordan, sharing the court with Magic, even in practice, meant something. In those legendary Dream Team scrimmages in Monte Carlo, it was Magic and Bird versus Jordan and Pippen. And Magic wasn't just there to soak it in. He was still trying to win every possession. Jordan later said, "That was the best basketball I've ever been a part of." He loved the intensity, the banter, the clash of styles. And Magic was in the middle of it all. The contrast between the two was stark. Magic was fluid, expressive, always reading the floor. Jordan was surgical, intense, a perfectionist. But they both loved the game deeply, and they both elevated the players around them. Magic did it through creativity. Jordan did it through expectation. 2 different philosophies, same impact. And then there's the business side. After both retired, Jordan continued to praise Magic, not just as a player, but as a visionary. Magic became a successful entrepreneur, a community leader, an owner, someone who understood that legacy extended beyond the court. Jordan, who would go on to become the first former player to own a majority stake in an NBA team, followed a similar path. In many ways, Magic laid the blueprint for what greatness after basketball could look like. In interviews, Jordan has consistently credited Magic Johnson as one of the few players he looked up to. That's not a phrase Jordan throws around often. It speaks to the influence Magic had on the entire league, and on Jordan personally. He was a peer, yes, but also a role model. And that's why, when Jordan lists his favorite players, Magic Johnson always makes the cut. It's not just about games played or stats recorded, it's about how someone shaped the game, how they made it look, how they led, and how they inspired. For Jordan, Magic Johnson wasn't just a rival or a teammate or a legend. He was a standard. There's something about Dominique Wilkins that commands respect, not just from fans, but from those who competed against him at the highest level. And for Michael Jordan, Dominique wasn't just a rival. He was one of the few players Jordan openly admired, not for titles or endorsements, but for something more raw, consistent, unapologetic competition. Unlike some of Jordan's other favorites, Dominique never won a championship. He never played on a super team. He never had a deep playoff run that defined his career, but he didn't need to. His greatness came through a different route, nightly grind, game after game, year after year. Wilkins showed up with the same explosive energy, the same fierce determination to score, to challenge, and to fight. And Jordan noticed. From the mid-1980s through the early 1990s, Jordan and Wilkins were 2 of the premier wing scorers in the NBA. Their clashes became some of the most must-watch matchups of the era. They didn't just play against each other, they went at each other. In their head-to-head matchups, the stats were nearly dead even. Jordan averaged 31.6 points, 6.3 rebounds, and 5.0 assists in 45 regular season games against Wilkins. Wilkins countered with 29.9 points, 6.6 rebounds, and 3.1 assists. It was a duel in the truest sense. No backdowns, no passive nights. And the fans knew it. One of their most iconic duels came in December 1986, a game that feels like a snapshot of that entire era. Jordan dropped 61 points, Wilkins responded with 37, and the Bulls barely escaped with a win. That wasn't rare. Nearly every time they faced off, the atmosphere changed. It wasn't just two stars sharing the court. It was two alphas trying to take the air out of the other's lungs. But the respect between them was real. Jordan once said in an interview, "Dominique didn't take a night off. If you were guarding him, you had better come ready, because he sure as hell was." That kind of consistency, not just in effort but in production, mattered to Jordan. It was the same standard he held himself to. From 1983 to 1993, Wilkins averaged over 25 points per game every single season. His scoring title chase in 1985 to 86 was legendary. That year, he averaged 30.3 PPG, just edging out Jordan, who only played 18 games due to injury, and other scoring legends of the time. Wilkins would finish his career with 26,668 points, which ranks him in the top 15 all-time even today. And it wasn't just volume, it was how he did it. Wilkins was relentless. His nickname, the human highlight film, wasn't just marketing, it was accurate. He attacked the rim with a level of ferocity and power that few wings ever matched. While others danced around contact, Wilkins invited it. His 2-foot power takeoffs, his mid-range game, his ability to elevate even when exhausted. These weren't gimmicks, they were weapons, and Jordan understood weapons. Both players were elite dunkers, and their paths famously crossed in multiple slam dunk contests, most notably in 1985 and 1988. In 1985, Wilkins took home the crown, showcasing his violent windmills and sheer explosiveness. In 1988, Jordan edged him in a controversial finish in Chicago. But even in victory, Jordan was never dismissive of Wilkins. In fact, many thought Dominique had the more powerful dunks that night. The debate continues even now. But for Jordan, the contest was about more than trophies. It was about earning the respect of a man who never flinched. Dominique wasn't just a highlight machine. He was tough. He came back from a ruptured Achilles in 1992, one of the most feared injuries in basketball, and still managed to average 29.9 points per game that very season. That kind of resilience, that refusal to fade quietly, that's the kind of mentality Jordan always admired. There was also an unspoken bond between them. Both were perimeter scorers who faced heavy defensive pressure every night, carried the burden of leading imperfect rosters. Both were judged harshly for playoff shortcomings, even though the issues often went deeper than their individual performances. Dominique was going toe-to-toe with Larry Bird's Celtics in the East, teams stacked with Hall of Famers, while Jordan's early Bulls were still learning how to win. Jordan knew what it was like to be blamed for losses that weren't entirely your fault. That shared weight forged a kind of kinship, even in silence. It's also worth noting how often Jordan's Bulls played Dominique's Hawks in high-stakes regular season games, especially on national TV. Their matchups were ratings gold, and both players leaned into the spotlight. You never saw a blowout. You never saw apathy. It was always personal, always intense. When Jordan names Dominique as one of his favorite players, it's not for sentimental reasons. It's for how he competed, how he never ducked the challenge, how he stayed loyal to Atlanta even when rings seemed out of reach, how he kept fighting even as his athleticism waned. That mattered. Jordan's appreciation wasn't just about athleticism, it was about mentality. He saw in Wilkins a kindred spirit, a scorer who didn't beg for fouls, a competitor who didn't look for excuses, a rival who didn't shy away from the spotlight. Dominique Wilkins never beat Jordan in a playoff series. He never won MVP, but if you ask Jordan which players he respected the most, not just admired, but truly respected, Dominique is one of the first names he'd say, not because of what he won, but because of what he stood for. When Charles Barkley's name comes up in connection with Michael Jordan, it's easy to think of their off-court friendship, golf outings, the trash talk, the infamous banter on TNT. But that surface-level camaraderie only scratches at the depth of their competitive relationship. Because during their peak years in the NBA, Barkley was more than just a media personality or a buddy. He was a legitimate rival, a relentless force of nature, and one of the few players Jordan admired. Not just as a personality, but as a player who could punch back. Barkley stood just 6 feet 4 inches or 6 feet 5 inches, depending on who you ask. Wildly undersized for a power forward in an era dominated by 7-footers. But he made up for it with brute strength, a freakish vertical, and perhaps the quickest second jump in league history. More than that, though, Barkley played with an edge. He wanted to dominate, to outmuscle, to outscore, and most nights he did. And Jordan respected that. Their rivalry peaked during the 1993 NBA Finals when Barkley's Phoenix Suns met Jordan's Bulls. At that point, Barkley had just won league MVP, ending Jordan's streak of 2 straight. It was a bold statement. The league was essentially saying Barkley had been the most valuable player in basketball. Jordan took it personally. Here's the key. He didn't dismiss Barkley. He didn't diminish him. He respected him enough to take him seriously. That series was a war. Barkley averaged 27.3 points, 13.0 rebounds, and 5.5 assists over 6 games. He put up a 44-point, 24-rebound masterpiece in Game 2, a performance that would have been legendary had the Suns not fallen in triple overtime. Barkley was everywhere, hitting mid-range jumpers, bullying Bulls big men, dishing out from the post. He wasn't trying to hang with Jordan, he was trying to beat him. But Jordan responded with one of the most dominant finals performances in history, 41.0 points per game, the highest scoring average ever in a finals series. Still, he acknowledged that Barkley brought out something extra in him. In interviews years later, Jordan would admit Charles was a handful. People forget how good he was. You had to bring your best. It wasn't just about the finals. Their careers intersected constantly, and their head-to-head stats reflect that tension. Across 26 regular season games, Jordan averaged 33.4 points, Barkley 23.1. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. Barkley was never tasked with guarding Jordan, but Jordan was often forced to carry his Bulls past Barkley-led Sixers or Suns teams that were physically tougher, especially in the paint, and Barkley was relentless. From 1986 to 1993, he averaged at least 23 points and 11 rebounds per game in 7 straight seasons. He was the NBA's leading rebounder in 1986 to 87 despite being undersized, a feat that stunned Jordan, who once said, "Charles might be the best rebounder I've ever seen, pound for pound. He just wanted it more." Jordan appreciated players who imposed their will on the game, not just those who were talented, but those who forced you to adjust. Barkley did that. He could control the pace of a game without dominating the ball. He could demoralize an entire front court in a single quarter. And most importantly, he never backed down. Their relationship grew friendlier after retirement, but during their playing years, there was tension, competitive tension. Both were alpha personalities, both trash-talked. Both wanted to win every drill in practice, every card game on the plane, every moment of every game. That's where the respect came from, not despite their similarities, but because of them. And Jordan didn't hand out that kind of respect lightly. He played against Magic and Bird. He shared the floor with Hakeem, Shaq, Ewing, but very few players could match Jordan's fire, minute for minute. Barkley was one of them. That mattered. There's also an underrated angle. Barkley could make Jordan laugh, even during the height of competition, and that wasn't common. Jordan was a laser-focused killer on the court, rarely distracted, rarely amused. But Barkley could cut through that. He made the game emotional, personal, human, and that kind of connection, mixed with competition, sticks. As the years passed, the mutual admiration only deepened, even through public fallout. When Jordan cut off Barkley after some critical comments on TV, Barkley later said, "He was like a brother. I still love him. I'll always respect what he did, not just for me, but for basketball." That wasn't PR. That was real. And for Jordan, even if the friendship went cold, the respect never left, because he knew what Barkley brought every night. He remembered 1993. He remembered those boards, the weight, the anger, the push. Jordan never forgot the ones who made him work harder, and Barkley was always one of them. You can't tell the story of Michael Jordan without Patrick Ewing, not just because Ewing was one of the first towering obstacles in Jordan's path, but because he never went away. From the mid-'80s until the late '90s, Ewing was always there, in Chicago Stadium, in Madison Square Garden, in the paint, on the boards, contesting jumpers, fighting for rebounds, trying, year after year, to break through. And Jordan respected the hell out of him for it. Their rivalry went back further than most people realize. Before the NBA, before the Nike ads and signature moves, they clashed on the biggest stage in college basketball, the 1982 NCAA Championship. Ewing's Georgetown Hoyas were heavily favored. Jordan, then just a freshman, hit the game-winning jumper to seal the title for North Carolina. That was the shot that launched Jordan's national fame, and it came right over the aura of Patrick Ewing. But Ewing didn't flinch, and Jordan never forgot that. By the time both were in the NBA, they represented opposite ends of the basketball spectrum. Jordan was the soaring guard rewriting offensive expectations. Ewing was the bruising big man trying to keep the game rooted in the physical, post-dominated traditions of the past. But neither fit into a stereotype. Ewing wasn't just a paint beast. He had a soft touch, a smooth mid-range jumper, and one of the most consistent turnaround shots in the game. And Jordan knew it. Across 15 years, they faced off over 40 times in the regular season, but the matchups that mattered came in the playoffs. The Bulls and Knicks collided in 6 different postseasons: 1989, 1991, 1992, 1993, 1996, and 1997. The Bulls won all of them, but none were easy. Ewing averaged 20.2 points, 10.2 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks per game in those playoff battles. And while the Knicks often fell short, Ewing's presence always forced Chicago to fight. Jordan has said in interviews, "Those Knicks teams made us earn everything." And Patrick, he was the anchor. He made it real. Their 1993 series might be the most iconic. The Eastern Conference Finals went 7 games. New York was the #1 seed. They led the series 2-0. Ewing was dominant, putting up 25 and 12 with 3 blocks a night. But Jordan responded with 54 points in Game 4, then closed it out in Game 7 at the Garden. Still, even in defeat, Ewing stood tall, literally and figuratively. He never blamed teammates. He never ducked responsibility. And Jordan noticed that. In an era full of big men, Shaq, Robinson, Olajuwon, it was Ewing who bore the weight of New York's expectations year after year, and he did it with a kind of quiet dignity that Jordan admired. There was also the physicality. Jordan hated being bumped, hacked, and grabbed, and the Knicks under Pat Riley were famous for exactly that. But Ewing wasn't a cheap shot artist. He played hard, but he played clean. He contested shots. He bodied you up. He made you feel the game, not through theatrics, but through endurance. Jordan once said, "Pat never took plays off. You always knew where he was, under the rim, ready." He made you think twice about every drive that's high praise, coming from the most fearless slasher in NBA history. Their respect extended off the court, too. Jordan and Ewing were teammates on the legendary 1992 Dream Team. And while that squad is remembered for the flash of Magic and Bird and the swagger of MJ and Barkley, Ewing was often the defensive backbone. In practices, it was Ewing who held his own in the post against Robinson and Malone. Jordan noticed who showed up, who played hard when no cameras were rolling. And that's why Ewing made this list. Not because he beat Jordan, he didn't. Not because he matched him in finals or rings, he couldn't. But because Jordan knew Ewing represented the kind of greatness that doesn't always come with a championship, but still demands recognition. He played over 1,100 games, scored more than 24,000 points, and grabbed nearly 11,000 rebounds. He was an 11-time All-Star, a 7-time All-NBA player, and a warrior for the Knicks through 15 brutal seasons. Jordan beat him, yes, he never disrespected him, and in some ways, that's the ultimate test. Jordan admired the killers, the Magics and Birds, the Barkleys and Wilkins, but he reserved a special kind of respect for those who never folded, even when the odds were stacked, even when they lost. Patrick Ewing never folded. He fought every year, every series, every possession. And for Michael Jordan, that kind of fight was unforgettable. Unforgettable fight always lead to hate between players. Legends Bill Walton also named 6 players he hated. If you want to know the list, click the video appear on your screen. Also, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video and share your thoughts in the comments section.